Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop. All the news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's the host.
Welcome to Inside Scoop, Virginia. I'm Bettina Lawton, and I'm your host. And tonight we are talking politics. November 7th, of course, was a huge historic day for Democrats in Virginia. Not only did we win the governor's mansion by almost 9 points and about 250,000 votes, but for only the second time in our history, we elected a statewide candidate who was an African American. Of course, that's Justin Fairfax, whom we elected to be our lieutenant governor. We also picked up 15 seats in the House of Delegates, which was much more than the Democratic caucus thought we would do, so that was a pleasant surprise as well. Now, many commentators view what happened in Virginia as a repudiation of Donald Trump and his policies. There are a lot of newly formed activist groups that were out there helping, and the real question for us is, what can we do to make sure that we translate the same kind of results that we had this year into next year's elections, when Senator Tim Kaine will be running for re-election and all of the congressional seats will be up for election as well. Many of those districts were won by Ralph Northam this year. They were won by Hillary Clinton last year, so we should be able to turn some of those seats. Now, the person who is with me tonight to talk about those kinds of issues is none other than Zakiya Thomas. She was the campaign manager for Justin's successful campaign for lieutenant governor. She is the first African American woman to actually run a statewide campaign in Virginia, and she has a proven record of helping candidates win votes in Virginia on the state and local levels. She managed races in Fairfax County for clerk of the court and sheriff, as well as Justin's stunning campaign for attorney general in 2013, where he went from an unknown candidate to garnering over 48% of the primary vote against Mark Herring, who at the time was a sitting Virginia senator. So prior to managing campaigns, Zakiya helped small business startups and organizations in transition as a management consultant for over 15 years. In 2014, she started her own consulting firm, the Thomas Consulting Group, which is founded on the premise of doing well while doing good to help organizations grow, adapt, and thrive. Zakiya is also a licensed social worker, and she actively volunteers with the Fairfax County's Nurturing Parenting Program. She received her Master's of Science in Social Work from Columbia University and a Bachelor's of Science from the College of William and Mary. And so, Zakiya, thank you so much. I've never had you on the show before. I appreciate you taking time out and of your recovery from this massive campaign that you have been involved in. So let me ask you this, because I said that you are a licensed social worker. Mm-hmm. You do this on a voluntary basis. You did all of this consulting for companies and change management and all that good kind of stuff. So what on earth possessed you in 2013 to get involved in politics?
Well, Bettina, I've always been interested in governance and leadership. When I was at William and Mary, part of my minor was in government and political science, and so I've carried that with me and used my social work background and my consulting experience and brought that to campaigns. I actually started off on Justin's campaign as a volunteer. But because I have a management background, he was looking for a campaign manager, and it was a natural fit. So from there, I started working with Justin. We launched a very successful campaign, and here I am now.
Well, it was pretty surprising. I remember at the time in 2013 hearing about somebody named Fairfax who was running, and I was like, who the heck is that? Mm-hmm. I had no clue. So it was really an amazing race, and we're going to talk about that some more. But I did want to ask you, because I've observed you in some campaigns, whether or not you think your background in social work and change management makes it different when you manage a campaign than some of the younger folks who are coming straight out of like poli-sci degrees or something to that effect. Does it make a difference?
It does. I think it does, because not only do I bring the experience that I've had over the 15 years of consulting, I think of political campaigns as startups. So in a lot of ways, it's just like a startup in that you have a company or product, a candidate, who you need to take from having no name recognition, build their brand up, introduce them to the marketplace, the voters, and then from there grow the company, which is build your revenue base with your supporters and with your contributions, build your name recognition and making sure that more people know of you as you go across the Commonwealth. And in doing that, it's pretty similar to running a startup company, starting from a small place and growing that enterprise. And for social work in particular, it's invaluable in what I do. My background in social work, I focused my studies on social welfare management and policies and political social welfare policy. And so using those skills, I not only have a better understanding of what needs to happen on the political front and the policy front, but the consulting skills and the interpersonal skills that you learn through that process is invaluable in terms of helping to manage clients, manage campaigns, manage the interpersonal relationships to make them most effective. It helps you learn how to motivate people in a way that gets them to come to your side and understand what you're trying to build and want to help build that with you.
Well, I will say that I heard that a lot, particularly in this most recent campaign, that when people reached out for you, you actually responded and you were prompt, and so I've heard all kinds of good things about you.
That's
just saying.
That's good to know.
So what's involved in building that campaign structure, particularly in 2013 when you started out? Nobody knew who Justin Fairfax was. He wasn't a party person. Of course, he wasn't a party person this year either when he started out. So how do you do that? How do you build it? What's the critical pieces to doing a building out a campaign for somebody who's unknown?
Well, it starts with having a phenomenal candidate. And I was very lucky in 2013, Justin Fairfax sold himself. He is very charismatic and he understands how to connect with people and to engage them and motivate them to aspire to something better and something bigger. So that was a great platform to start with. But with that, you also need to build out the organization. So you need someone to organize your campaign manager. But if you're a small campaign, the fundamentals are you need someone to help you raise money. You need to make sure that you have folks who support you, who can help you build that base of support across whatever region or jurisdiction you're looking to grow. And then you need volunteers, and you need someone who, depending on the size of your campaign, who can organize those folks for you to make sure that they're doing the kind of work you need them to be successful.
So how much does field play into it when you have an unknown candidate? I mean, it sounds like you're talking much bigger pictures of this, but people always talk about field and door to door, and when you're doing particularly statewide, that's got to be hard to do.
It is, and whether it's statewide or if it's local, you really do have to rely on the volunteers and supporters who believe in you, because those are the folks who are going to go knock the doors when it's raining outside, when it's 100 degrees in the summertime. Without those folks, you really don't have that kind of capacity. When running this in a local race, you don't really have the resources you need to have a full-fledged field operation. And in statewide race, we ran a field operation for our primary, but then it was absorbed by the coordinated campaign, and so we didn't have our own. But you still needed to make sure that your people, your supporters, your volunteers were motivated and had someone who could organize them to tell them which doors to knock and what to say when they get there.
So let's back up a little bit, because on primaries, we have a lot of people. We've got a couple folks later in the show who are going to be involved in a primary. You get a lot of people who think they want to run, and there's a primary. And how do you organize around that? It seems to me there's a very small pool of people who traditionally participate in primaries. So how do you get them, particularly if you're not a party insider?
So you build that base of support by reaching out to the people who are around you naturally. So we're all involved in groups. We attend church or a synagogue or a mosque. So we have folks who are around us who can help us get our name out there and spread the word. And the smaller the race, the more important that is. Because if you have a community and a base of support in that community, you can then use that to build and grow and bring more people into a fold than who otherwise may not do in a primary. I think in both 2013 and in this race this year, we did a phenomenal job in bringing more people to the process than there have been in the past. And some of that in the general may have been with effects of the current administration, but also we had people knocking doors. We had people going out there and talking to their community groups, inviting Justin in to talk to them so that he could meet more people and inform them of what's going on and the importance of a primary in deciding what our general election will be.
And how important is it then to have folks, and I guess we call them house parties, meet and greets kind of thing. Is that really where, if you're an unknown person, particularly at the beginning of the campaign, you've really got to spend some time doing that and identifying, okay, my kid's on the soccer team, and wow, I guess that's the question. How do you, if I'm standing on the sidelines of my kid's soccer game, politics is not usually what one starts discussing with people on the sidelines. So how do you tap into these groups you're already in if they're not political in nature? How do you bring that conversation up?
You have the conversation. So it starts by saying, I'm interested in making a difference in our community. Or you start by saying, wow, did you see what happened X, Y, and Z? And you get a feel for what people actually believe. And in that process, you can identify and say, okay, would I invite this person over to learn more about what's going on in the campaign? Do they seem like they have a shared similar political background to me in the sense that we can have an honest conversation about this and look to change? But it really does start with just asking people, saying, I'm looking to run. I would love if you could come attend a meeting, or if they're a friend, then you can ask them to host something for you. But it's really about going to those networks and telling folks that you're running and why you're running. Because even people who may not be politically active or who may not necessarily share your exact political identification, they have a connection with you. Mm-hmm. And so if they have a connection with you, they're more likely to want to connect and help you succeed in whatever you're trying to do.
Well, that was something that I noticed with some of the races that we had this past year. Mm-hmm. Folks saying, so-and-so can't possibly win because she doesn't raise enough money or she's not in the party. And they didn't seem to understand that the person had those deep roots in the community.
Right.
And they were able to tap on that for the primary to win primaries when people never thought they would. And then, of course, the naysayers got in and said, well, yeah, but that's not going to be enough in a general. And some of those people won in the general as well. So you really sort of have to identify, what I hear you saying, you should identify all those different groups you may be involved in your community already. And you can't be deterred just because you've never had that conversation. It's a personal relationship.
It's the personal relationship that makes the difference. People don't support you because of necessarily your political ideology. They support you because they support you and they like you. And so the more people you get to acknowledge that you have this mutual interest, the more people will come to aid you when you need them.
Okay. So if you are somebody who has never done any fundraising, I mean, what do you do? I always hear, and certainly when I was a candidate, it was always the hardest thing, was raising money.
Right.
Is that, if you're running a campaign and you're running with somebody who's never run before, what do you tell them? Can you just hire somebody to do the fundraising, or do you actually have to get them to do it?
For a candidate who's never run before, it's very important to start the process, and we can talk a little bit about whether or not they need to hire someone or if they just want to continue on their own.
Okay. Well, you can tell that Zakiya knows what she's doing because she heard our music and knew we were going to go to break. So stay with us because we're going to talk some more about Zakiya and how we translate this year's success into success next year.
You made your house a reality. Homeschooling yourself on loans, color-coding listings, and flushing every toilet in a 20-mile radius. If you can ace house hunting, you can do it for retirement. Get on track with tips at aceyourretirement.org.
Here's to the things that can keep us safe. Those we use all the time with hardly a thought. Those that are silently standing by to save our lives. And now, those that we carry with us everywhere we go. Many mobile devices will now bring you wireless emergency alerts, real-time information directly from local sources you know and trust. With the unique sound and vibration, you'll be in the know.
Listen. I realize that I'm not perfect, but it all really started to change because you judge me for having a problem. No one is going to know that I need help. I need help. I know that no one is going to judge me for having a problem. I realize that I'm not perfect, but it all really started to change because you listen.
Family.
Whether it's a short trip or a long haul.
Estimated time, 47 hours.
They will beg.
You're hungry? I'm happy to provide.
They will plead.
Deep fried butter on a stick.
But whatever you do, don't wimp out.
Now you're talking.
Make them buckle up.
He can't hurt.
Remember, safety first. Cheese curls second.
Are you orange?
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop Virginia. I'm Bettina Lawton. I'm your host, and we are talking tonight with Zakiya Thomas. She was the campaign manager for Justin Fairfax in his successful race for lieutenant governor, and we're trying to pull out from her wisdom for everybody who's going to be running both next year and the year after when we have huge state and local elections. Now, when we left, we were talking about fundraising, never anybody's favorite thing, but essential in order to be able to spend the money to build the campaign structure. You got a brand new person. I mean, what do you have to tell these folks? Calling up and asking somebody for money for yourself. I think a lot of people will call up and say, hey, the soccer team needs, new balls, or the college needs whatever. But to call up and say, hey, I need you to give me your money. How do you get candidates to do that?
Well, you start with people that will be hard for them to say no. So you start with friends and family. So the first calls you usually make are the people that like the person, or invested in their future, invested in their success. And so you start from there, grow and grow and grow, and eventually you add to with circles from the soccer team, from your Rotary Club, from church, from your synagogue, from your mosque, from wherever you go in your daily life, and all of the contacts that you've built over the course of your life. I still have a really good friend from elementary school. She'd probably be the first person I call if I needed to raise money in a campaign, because I know that she believes in me and wants to see me succeed. So that's where you start. And then you grow from there, and that's not just how you build your base of fundraising support, but your base of support in general.
So when you have like a local election, as opposed to a statewide, I'm assuming the minimum dollars. I mean, is there really, you see some of these fundraising things, particularly on the national level, where they'll say, oh, they went and they raised $10 million at a dinner. So I'm assuming if you're running for a local race and somebody wants to do an event, do you set a hard number that say you must raise X amount of dollars, or do you, at least when you're starting out, is it sort of your best effort? Because people who haven't done it before, it's a little nerve-wracking.
So I would recommend that you start off by saying, our goal is to hit X number of dollars from this event. Can you help us do that? And give the host a goal, because everyone needs to know what they should be going after. Otherwise, they don't really know how to fundraise. Whereas if you say, my goal from this event is $1,000, that might be really high for some hosts, so you might have to change that. But you have the conversation with them to say, given your network and the people you think you're going to invite to this event, how much do you think that the average person can give? And then build it off of that to make it reasonable.
Okay, so it doesn't have to be some huge mountain to climb.
No, and in a local race, you don't really need to raise all that much money. Realize that the money determines what you can do, but it does not determine whether or not you can win. So you can raise a lot of money, but not be successful because you wasted and spent it on things that didn't matter.
Right.
So it's all about raising the amount of money to invest in the appropriate resources for your campaign.
Okay, well, let's talk about party structure and party insiders for a second, because we saw a lot of folks in the most recent election, and certainly the consummate party outsider won last 2016. How important is that in today's environment? If you are considered a party insider, is it a disadvantage now, or does it still have some key advantages to the people who are considered insiders?
Well, it depends on the race, and it also depends on the person. Because I found that you can be a political insider or an elected official, but it's what have you done with the time and the power and the influence that you've accumulated through that office. So if within the party, there is structure built in that is very helpful in a primary and in a general election. So I think having party support is important. In our race, for instance, Justin was an outsider in 2013, but he worked extremely hard over the last 4 years to make the relationships, build the networks, and the support that he needed to be successful in this run. And he did a wonderful job doing so. And so I think that he was able to leverage the two. So he brought new people to the fold, but he also was able to build on and leverage the relationships and the existing structure we have here in Virginia and the party.
So the other lesson from that as well is, if the first time you don't succeed, it doesn't mean you can't succeed.
Exactly.
I do remember seeing him around all over the place for like 4 years at every different function and committee and what have you, meeting people and talking to them. So he wasn't that unknown candidate that he had been in 13. So.
And people still thought of him as an outsider.
Yeah, they did.
And others thought of him as an insider. So I don't think those labels necessarily make a difference. It's how are you connecting with people? Are you bringing more people to your side, and are you being effective in communicating to them the goals that you hopefully share with them once you're elected?
I want to ask you particularly about women candidates. Large number of women ran in the House of Delegate races, both in the primaries and in the general, and a lot of them won. A lot of them were not really viewed as contenders by the party structure, and now they've won. So is it different running as a woman? You've handled women, you've handled male candidates. So what kind of advice would you give to women who are running?
Run is the first and foremost. A lot of women feel like they need to be asked to run, but no one asks men to run for office, or very rarely. They just do it because they have the desire to do so. Women have a lot of natural support and structure in their communities. They are usually involved in organizations with their children's groups, if they have children, or in their children's schools. So you have a network there. It's just a matter of learning how to use that network to build yourself up and build up your campaign to then be successful.
Now, is there any truth to this notion that women can't raise money?
That's not true.
Okay, so it's just a question of getting comfortable with the process.
So I think they say the same thing about African Americans too, that certain candidates can't raise money. Well, no one has ever really put that to the test. It's harder to raise money as a woman, as a minority candidate, simply because our communities aren't used to giving in the same way, but it's not impossible. So if you have the right candidate who can motivate people to believe in what they're trying to do and inspire people to give, then you can raise money. It's a matter of not only your determination to do so, but also your willingness and the hard work you put into it.
So I know in the business world back in the day, the adage was always that if you were a woman and you were trying to become a particular position, move up the ladder, so to speak, that you had to be twice as good and work twice as hard. Is that the same thing in the political arena these days?
Yes. I would say as a woman and running the races that I have, you do run into a number of obstacles. There are so very few female campaign managers. Usually the positions are communications and maybe finance, but typically that's not the case. I have seen very few women in these positions, and I think that we need more because I think it brings a different perspective to the race. And female candidates in particular have a different kind of understanding because they have a different experience than most of the male candidates who've run. They've had to manage their family if they have one. They've had to manage their career and other expectations. And it's just a different way, and it's a much more challenging way because you do always have the fact that you're a woman that often plays against you.
Right. It's not like you can hide it. I always used to laugh at the women who would get all dressed up in the suits like the men wore and everything, and I used to think to myself, do you think they don't notice that you're a woman? I wasn't quite sure how that was supposed to work. But it should. From what you're saying, it would sound like women would be better candidates because we're used to all that multitasking, which you have to do in a campaign as you sort of move through the various requirements.
And how many women do you know that have raised money for a social organization, their children's basketball team, for the PTA, or for their job? Like that's what they do at work. So why wouldn't they be able to take those skills that they've learned in the workplace, at home, in relationships, at school, and bring them into politics? It's just the same.
Well, it's interesting because when you were saying that, I thought, yeah, I remember when my younger son was in high school, I ran the class dinners for 4 years. We had like 400 or 500 people there.
Yeah.
And
how'd you raise the money to do that?
Yeah, you just ask, and
people give
wanted
to
support.
causes, right?
Yeah, people wanted to support the class and the kids and all that good stuff.
Right.
So what advice do you have about the new people who are thinking of running either next year or in 17? 17 is a huge year. 19 is a huge year. Board of Supervisors, school boards, the entire state Senate, the House of Delegates, they're all up.
Yes.
So this is a massive, massive year. I would hope, with the enthusiasm that we have seen this year, that there would be tons and tons of people saying, I can do that. So what kind of advice do you give to those people?
Start building your relationships now. So the networks that we talked about that will help you win an election are the networks you need to cultivate right now. Talk to folks to figure out, are there people in my community, in my neighborhood, or my network in general who believe in the same things I do in terms of our political landscape? And start to use those relationships to then say, okay, I have a group of people I can go to when the time comes, but you start to cultivate that and get them in the habit of talking about the sorts of issues that you want to talk about, so that when the time comes, you're ready.
So we've got a couple of minutes left, but I wanted to ask you, because they seem to be everywhere. And in fact, I think in yesterday's Washington Post, there was an article about the liberal ladies of Chesterfield County. When I first heard about them, I thought there's two of them. But was actually a group down there who really got very, very active. And we all know of all these indivisibles that are out there and all these different groups. So in the course of running this year's campaign, even contrasting it to 2013 or your other races, how was it to work with non-party people? Is it more difficult? Do they work well with each other? How do you get everybody on the same bus going in the same direction?
Well, I wouldn't consider myself a party person, so I didn't see it as any different.
Okay.
Because I ran the race in 2013, because I've run local races, I have connections and have built relationships with people, but it's the same thing building those relationships with people who are not from traditional Democratic Party groups. So they have the same goals, they have the same ideology or similar ideology, and so it's a matter of we are working towards the same end, so let's work together to make this happen, and have your folks come and help us out with volunteers, fundraising, and the like. And that's really all you need to do, is just work with them, collaborate with these organizations, and in Virginia you can actually do that.
Okay. And do they all get along with each other? Is there, because I know from the party perspective, I have heard certain people in the party say, we're the party, if they want to be involved, they should join the party, and the other ones don't. I mean, the other groups are not interested in the bureaucracy they perceive in the parties.
And there is quite a bit of bureaucracy, and some political committees have the tendency to alienate people simply because it's their way and they're used to doing it a certain way. But the Commonwealth is changing, the country is changing. And so if the party wants to adapt and go forward, then they need to be willing to bring more people into the fold and accept them for who they are and what they believe in, instead of trying to ostracise.
You think that's going to happen?
I think it could happen. And I think that with Justin in office now, and with the existing Attorney General, and with Governor Northam, I think there's a possibility, because I think those groups were very helpful in winning these elections, and they're not going anywhere for the short term. And so if we bring them in, I think we have a good job of doing that.
All right, well, it's very optimistic. I'm glad to hear something optimistic in politics, because it all tends to be just so not optimistic. So are you going to continue, two seconds to tell me, are you going to continue in politics or just go back to consulting?
Consulting for now, but politics is part of what I want to do, so you'll see me soon.
Good, terrific. Well, I want to thank you for coming and being part of the show and talking about your experiences, because I think there's a lot of people out there who are very interested in running for office and need the little push to get there. So thank you so much, Zakiya Thomas.
Thank you, Bettina.
For all the papas out there, let's stop what we're doing and take a moment to be with our kids. They can be loud moments, goofy moments, dorky moments. It doesn't really matter. Every time dads take a moment to be with their kids, it's pretty momentous. So let's all take a moment to make a moment today.
Hey, did you know that 2.4 million loving cats and dogs in shelters and rescues need our help to find a home? Go to theshelterpetproject.org and search your local shelters and rescues. Go for a cuddle with your next best friend. Adopt.
Okay, so we drowned the fire, stirred it, drowned it again, and now just feel if it's cold.
Yeah.
Cool.
Smokey just gave me a bear hug.
I know. I already posted it.
We cannot be bystanders.
We can stop to make sure someone is okay.
We can warn someone when their drink isn't safe.
And disrupt the situation.
We can.
Get someone the cab.
Or walk them home safely.
We can make campuses safer for our friends.
Our roommates.
Our our classmates,
our fellow human beings.
We cannot be bystanders.
We can.
Intervene.
It's on us.
All of us.
Learn how and take the pledge at itsonus.org.
When it comes to saving money,
What?
don't act like a baby.
Oh, it's like they're having their own little meeting.
This is so humiliating.
Be the boss.
I'm the boss.
What the?
Power nap.
You were saying.
And make a budget.
Let's get to work.
Need a little help?
Stacy, read back the notes.
I can't read. What's it say?
Create a personalized savings plan and get other tools and tips
We can share.
You obviously didn't go to business school.
at feedthepig.org.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome to Inside Scoop, Virginia. I'm Bettina Lawton, and I'm your host. And now we have with us a candidate who's running in the Virginia 10th Congressional District. Now, Ralph Northam won the 10th Congressional District by 55.62% of the vote, and Hillary Clinton won that district by 10 points against Donald Trump. So despite the fact that we have a Republican congresswoman in that seat, it is clearly a seat that the Democrats could take. Now, the primary to choose the Democratic candidate is going to be on June 12th, and the election will be November 6th. And by some counts, there are more than 10 people who say they're going to run for this in the primary, so it's really going to be a little insane. Some of the folks I recognize from past years and know that they are what I tend to call vanity candidates. They will drop out before the actual primary. But they run in almost every election for something. But we're going to focus tonight on two of the people that I think are actually serious candidates, the first of whom is Dan Helmer. Dan is the son and grandson of immigrants and refugees to the United States. He's a 2003 graduate of West Point, and he served for 11 years on active duty in the military from 2003 to 2014, including tours in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Korea. He also attended Oxford as a Rhodes Scholar. The Army stationed Dan and his family in Northern Virginia several years ago, and after leaving the active service, he has worked as a business strategist before being recruited to run for the Virginia 10th Congressional District. He remains in the U.S. Army Reserves, where he was recently selected for promotion to a lieutenant colonel. So congratulations on that, Dan.
Appreciate it, Bettina. Thanks for having me on tonight.
Absolutely. Thanks that you could come. So who's Dan Helmer and why the Army? Now, you know, my son joined the Army, so I'm always interested in folks.
I know it's close to you, given that we met each other at a Veterans of Foreign Wars post. Yeah.
I looked up and said, what is Dan Helmer doing at my post? And then they're like, well, that would be because he's a member. I'm
That's
like,
right.
okay, that works.
Well, yeah, for me, service, I'm, as you said, the son of an immigrant. My grandparents came here. They were refugees and Holocaust survivors. And that's always left me feeling that this country was a place that welcomed them, that gave them an opportunity to prosper, that offered us freedom and prosperity and peace. And I've always believed that that American dream belongs to all of us. It's something worth fighting for. It's what caused me at 17 to raise my right hand and swear that I would uphold and defend our Constitution, because I think it's that important. And it's those same things that motivated me to join the Army, to serve, to actually volunteer to go to Afghanistan when they were looking for folks who needed to go there, that said when I looked at what was happening in our politics today and how bad a situation that could leave our country in, that said I need to stand up and do something different and help get our democracy, restore our democracy and get our politics back on the right track.
So I know that you were recruited to run for Congress. So who's recruiting you? Who is the mysterious hand behind Dan Helmer?
Well, not mysterious. There's an organization called New Politics.
Okay.
New Politics focuses on bringing people with a background of service who would not otherwise run for public office into public office. And they called me, Emily Cherniak, who runs it, and said, we think that it's a new time in America, a time to move past politicians and get public servants into office, and we think that you would be a compelling candidate. And in addition to being a compelling candidate, you would be a compelling congressperson, and asked me if I'd be willing to run. And she asked me at the end of the conversation, are you willing to serve your country? And that's not ever something I've been able to say no to. So
I was going to say, you say that to a military person and the answer is going to have to be. It just has to be. So why are you actually running for Congress? What is it that, some people say, gee, that's such a big jump. Why don't you run for something local? So why Congress?
Yeah, so for me, the election of Donald Trump is a calamity, but it's also the result of politics and politicians who have failed the American people at the national level. And for us to move forward as a country, for our country to continue to work, government is not the problem, but Americans have become so distrustful of it that they were willing to put a guy like Donald Trump in office. And to get past that, to restore faith and trust in our government, we're going to need a new generation of proven leaders with a record of service to go back into Washington and get it back on the right track.
Okay, so is it just because you've been in the military? Is that the background that you think will enable you or prepare you to serve in Congress, or what else is there?
Yeah, so for Karen and I, this is about service, and I think being part of the military is about service. It's also about leadership, and I've had opportunities both in business and in the military. I mean, in Afghanistan, I was charged with building a national training center that we use to train not only American advisors coming into the country, but also their coalition counterparts and the Afghans who are on the ground also fighting with us. And it provided me an opportunity to lead a team. I've led teams on some of the most important national security missions that exist in our country, and have had a chance in the private sector to lead teams and actually work on some of the most difficult problems facing business and facing our government. And so bringing leadership skills, bringing problem-solving skills, and lastly, what we have right now is a Congress dominated by politicians focused on scoring points at the expense of actually bringing solutions for the American people. And what you're going to need in Congress is people who have a record of reaching out to multiple people with differing viewpoints, creating a round table where there's lots of people sitting at it. And it's something I saw in business, something I saw in Afghanistan and the rest of my military service, that when we bring together diverse groups of people and we listen to what they have to say, the seemingly unsolvable can be solved. And it's something that I plan to bring with me to Congress.
Well, that would certainly be a contrast with Congresswoman Comstock, because she won't even do town halls, as I recall reading. She doesn't actually go out and talk to people except in very controlled circumstances.
In controlled circumstances, and look, the word that we're supposed to use for the people who represent us is representative. And Congresswoman Comstock is no representative. Her values are deeply out of step with Virginia 10. I mean, look at this tax bill that she just voted on. It is going to cost $3 billion out of the pockets of hardworking people in Virginia 10 and give it to corporations. And with what result? To leave our children $1.5 trillion in debt, to erode our national security. I mean, that's what she's doing in Congress on issues like gun safety. I mean, in the wake of what happened in Las Vegas, what happened in school shootings most recently in California, she's done nothing. The best she could muster was to send a letter to the ATF to think about additional controls. She's taken over $100,000 from the NRA. She's deeply out of step with protecting us, protecting our community, and making sure that we as a country move forward.
So that at least is one way you're going to be different from Barbara Comstock. That was going to be my next question. I was like, well, that's pretty clear what's part of the differences. Now, I'm seeing on my screen here that we actually have a question from somebody named Amanda in Fairfax Station, but I don't see the question, so I can't ask it to you. So we're going to go to the next one, which is, you've got about 9 other opponents, as far as I can tell. So what sets you apart from them? I don't know a lot about a lot of them, but what is it that you think sets you apart? So when people go in to vote in the primary, they'll actually, circle the circle next to your name.
Yeah, sure. For Karen and I, this is about service, about serving our community and serving our country. And right now is not a time in our nation where we need more politicians.
Okay.
And I'm not a politician. I plan to bring a new generation of proven leadership, dedication to our country, and an aim to restore our democracy, not just play politics as usual.
Okay. So what are some of the key issues that you actually want to address in Congress?
Yeah, so when Karen and I and our boys were stationed here, what we experienced was a warm and vibrant and diverse community, a place that made us want to stay, a place that feels like it's truly on the move, and a place where many of us are focused on serving our country and our government, and where our jobs and our livelihoods often depend on that. And so the dysfunction that exists today in Washington is creating a lot of insecurity here at home. We don't know what the budget is going to look like. We don't know if it's going to pass on time. We know that we have a Congress talking about adding $1.5 trillion of debt to and while they're taxing us more. It's going to hurt all of us here at home. We need to get Congress back on track, focused on doing things in a way that makes sense and serving the people of the country and also serving us here in Virginia 10. So I think that's first and foremost. I think there's other issues that we specifically need to fix. I mean, one on gun safety. I mean, we've had all of these terrible tragedies recently happen around the country. We have thousands die every year from gun violence. And we have representation right now in Congress from Barbara Comstock that does nothing about it. And so we really need to focus on getting sensible gun laws in our country and gun laws that we largely agree on. I mean, it doesn't make sense that if you're on the terrorist watch list, you can buy a gun, and yet Barbara Comstock has done nothing about that. And so the third thing for me is what look, I've carried guns in our conflicts.
I was going to say,
all over the world. I'm
a
trying to
military guy.
I know how to use one. I know my way around a weapon. And the reality is, in the countries I've been to in the world, places like Afghanistan and Iraq, I mean, more guns aren't making anybody safer. I mean, these are not places that you want to live. And one of the reasons you want to live there is because everybody's got a weapon and they're using them against each other. It's time to move beyond that and have sensible gun safety laws in our country. And I think, lastly, one of the things I've seen in my service around the world is just the impact of environmental degradation and climate change on our national security. I mean, right here in Virginia, sea level rise is impacting our naval infrastructure. Overseas, I mean, if you look at what happened in Niger recently, there's a climate change aspect to that, where the change of climate in the deserts in Africa is actually causing insecurity and indirectly, I mean, there's lots of causes, led to the deaths of our soldiers over there. And we have a Congress that's doing nothing, very little about it. And yet we need to be investing in the energy infrastructure of the 21st century that's going to bring great jobs here. That's going to make us work. And I think we need to get Congress back on track there.
Well, I want to ask you, we've got a couple minutes left. You had a video that went absolutely viral, and I must say, I just thought it was very, very funny and well done. Your latest video, though, is very different. There's a fellow who, as I recall, this was one of the interpreters you had, I guess, in Afghanistan, who you got out somehow. So tell me that story, why you got all involved in all that.
Sure. So Hamed Secondary was one of several interpreters that worked for us in the National Training Center we built in Afghanistan. And here's a guy who in 2001 raised his hand and said, I want to work with the U.S. military and help rebuild the country that had been decimated by the Taliban and been the source of attacks on our country. And he served for many years before I ever got to meet him. So he was part of this National Training Center, helping to make sure that Afghan and U.S. and coalition soldiers were all on the same page, working together in the country. And one of the things I did is helped sponsor him for what's called a special immigrant visa. He came to the U.S., he stayed with my family. We asked, and he asked, what should I do? And he looked up to me in many ways, and I said, well, have you thought about going in the military? Clearly it's something you know. And he actually enlisted in the Army, became a sergeant. He was actually returned to Afghanistan. He was wounded there and medically retired from the military. Just a great American and someone who I'm just so proud to have as part of my life, and who I'm so appreciative of his support, because it means so much that people like him who have done everything for their country will come back and be willing to support what we're trying to do here in Virginia 10.
Oh, well, that sounds wonderful. I want to ask you, because we've got 40 seconds left, where can people get more information from you? How can they contact you to say, I want to be involved?
Absolutely. So our website is Helmer, that's Helmer, for Congress.com. We're also on Facebook and LinkedIn, Facebook and Twitter, so at Helmer VA10. And would love to have you come, check us out, and become part of this movement to restore our democracy.
Well, I want to thank you for taking your time out. I know you're campaigning hard. I see you all over the place. And so thank you for coming tonight and sharing what you think is your vision and why you would be the best candidate to take on Barbara Comstock.
Thank you so much, Bettina. It's a pleasure to be on with you tonight.
Guess what? I have some news for you. There's free food right there, junk food. You see that truck? Oh, jeez. It's a 2 Michelin star chef. All for free, ladies and gentlemen. All for free.
Here we have a panzanella with summer vegetables and pesto. Enjoy.
How we doing?
So what do you got going on underneath that plate there?
This food is really about to be thrown away.
Yeah.
Is there something wrong with this food? Where did you get it from?
From farmers markets. They put aside the ugly vegetables and the ugly fruits.
Carrot top, soft avocados. It was all food that was going to be discarded.
Even the drink you had is made from like a little bruised peach. Did it taste a little bruised?
Great. It was good.
The average person throws away 24 pounds of food a month.
That's a lot.
Isn't that a lot? Go visit savethefood.com for more information. Thank you. Junk food time!
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome to Inside Scoop. I'm Bettina Lawton. I'm your host, and I have with me tonight Lindsey Davis Stover. She is running in the Democratic primary to challenge Barbara Comstock for the congressional seat in the Virginia 10th. It is a winnable seat. Hillary Clinton won it by more than 10%. Ralph Northam won it by almost 9%. So it's time that we got around to getting it for ourselves. So let me tell you a little bit about Lindsey. She went to work at the age of 14 and later held 2 jobs during high school to help her family save up money for her to attend college. With the assistance of government aid and by working 3 jobs, Lindsey received a Bachelor's of Arts in Communication and Political Science and a Master's in Public Policy from Baylor University. She also received a Master's in Public Administration from the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University. So Texas, Massachusetts, it all works. After college, Lindsey served in the AmeriCorps VISTA, which stands for Volunteers in Service to America program, where she had the opportunity to create meaningful and innovative change to civic education initiatives for high school students. She also co-developed a Power Set program, which stands for Powerful Opportunities for Women Eager and Ready for Science, Engineering, and Technology, and it's currently in use in several Houston area schools. Lindsey worked on Capitol Hill as Chief of Staff to Congressman Chet Edwards and served as a senior advisor in the Obama administration at the Department of Veterans Affairs. She is now a partner in Edwards, Davis, Stover and Associates, which is located in Fairfax County, Virginia. So thank you so much for coming to talk with us tonight. We're going to start out with the big question.
Sure.
So why are you running for Congress?
Absolutely. Well, you know, I'm honestly running for Congress because we need someone who fights for us, not just when it's easy, not when it's just convenient, but when it's hard and when it's tough. And running for Congress and running for office, in fact, was something I actually never thought I would do. It was a group of veterans that I had worked with for many years that first asked me to consider running. And honestly, it was my 2 daughters in the end that helped me make that decision.
Now your daughters are little. How did they help you make the
decision?
I don't think I let my sons when they were little help me make decisions.
Yes, well, you know, my daughters are ages 6 and 7, and the questions and concerns they were having after the election were questions and concerns no child in this country should have. And after months of those questions, one morning when I was taking them to school, they go to Churchill Elementary. And I had the radio on in the car, as I do most mornings, but this particular morning, I was more concerned about the library book that we had left on the kitchen table than anything else. But my oldest daughter was concerned about something far more important. And after a series of questions about this library book and getting no answer, I finally asked her what was wrong. And as her mother, the look of fear she had on her face was one I had never seen before.
Oh, wow.
And she answered by saying, "Mom, the radio said Donald Trump wants to put guns in our classroom."
Good heavens.
And what she was referring to was the story about Trump wanting to lift the ban on gun-free school zones. But what that meant to my daughter was something very different. It was the possibility of a gun in her classroom. And for me, I knew right then and there that not only did I know how to do something, but that I had to do something. And it wasn't about The fear my daughter had of a gun in her classroom, it was about something far greater. It's about fighting for a future that our children and our grandchildren don't have to fear. And it was that moment when we made the decision to run.
Okay. Well, let me ask you then, because in your background, and I said this during the intro, in the background you were chief of staff for Chet Edwards, and he had been a very long-serving congressman, went out, as I recall it, in the 2010 wave. So I know you've been on Capitol Hill, and you're now working on issues, and you were very involved in the government. So is that when you look and say, I'm ready to do this and be a congresswoman, are those the things in your background that are the most important that people should pay the most attention to, or what else is there?
I think my commitment to service. For me, growing up, I had to depend on government aid to go to school. And I had to depend on government aid and work multiple jobs to put myself through school. And it was that moment where I had that deep commitment that I had to give back. I know that I wouldn't be sitting here today. I wouldn't have the opportunities I've had to serve in AmeriCorps, to serve in a senior level in Capitol Hill or in the Obama administration, had I not had that government aid to help me go to school. And it wasn't that I wasn't smart enough or that I wasn't willing to work hard, which we didn't have the means to provide those opportunities. And so I've always had a deep commitment to giving back. And education in particular is something that I'm very passionate about. And another issue I'm very passionate about is working for veterans care and making sure veterans have the care they not only deserve, but they fought for our country and they've earned. And I've spent my career fighting and being an advocate for veterans.
Let me go back to the education for a minute, because I look at some of the proposals that come out of the Trump administration, where they're talking about taxing the kids who are the students, who are essentially like in work study, or they're getting their tuition in lieu of paying it. They're getting it because they're being teaching assistants or something. And all of a sudden that's going to be taxable income.
That's right.
And they're talking about doing away with the student loan forgiveness if you work for nonprofits. All of that seems to me incredibly destructive, both to our children and their ability to do what you did, which is work, get through, get some government aid, and move up and do the things that are of value to society. And also directly impacts the ability for people in poorer communities who are being served by these doctors and nurses and folks who are in this loan forgiveness program, who are taking less money in exchange for service. And that just strikes me as so counterintuitive. If you want to, and I hate the phrase, make America great again, it seems to me you're destroying it.
Absolutely, absolutely. In a time where we should be working to make college more affordable for families, working to make sure students aren't paying back their college loan well into their 40s. We, in fact, the Trump administration and Republicans in Congress are making it harder for families to send their children to school. The Trump budget proposes a 50% cut on important programs that help students go to college. Federal work study, for example, is slashed by 50%. This new tax bill that was just passed and that Barbara Comstock voted for makes it harder for students to pay back their student loans, makes it harder to go to graduate school. So, time and time again, the Trump administrations and Republican and Congress, have put corporations in the center of their policy, and we need to be fighting hard to put American families in the center of our public policy.
Yeah. It just absolutely boggles my mind.
It does.
So are there specific issues? I mean, you mentioned the thing with the budget and Comstock. Are there other issues that you think you'll do a better job at representing Virginia 10th than Barbara Comstock's doing on certain issues?
Absolutely. I mean, the issues that are so important to families in our district are health care, education, transportation, and there's a lot of veterans in our district. And so those are the issues that we really want to champion in this campaign. Families of over 66,000 children and over 1,000 pregnant mothers will receive a letter this week that the CHIP health insurance has expired. And we need leaders in Congress that fight for our families. and making sure that children get the coverage that they need, that pregnant mothers here in Virginia get the coverage that they need. And so we need a strong advocate in Congress that's willing to fight for us, and that's what we have to send to Washington.
Well, let me ask you, because you mentioned the veterans issues as a key, and I know you worked at the VA at one point in time. I keep hearing in the veterans community, because my son is a veteran and I'm president of my auxiliary, my VFW auxiliary, about the continuing problems with the vets being able to access that health care. Is that really a solvable problem? Because I know Obama was working on it, and it didn't really happen. And now we have people who, from my perspective, don't actually care. So how does that work?
Right. Well, one, we have to fund VA at the levels in which it needs to be funded to take care of veterans. We should never go into war if we aren't simultaneously planning to take care of those men and women when they return home. And unfortunately, we've had years and years of not planning for VA to be able to take care of those men and women. And I think we're working towards providing additional care for veterans. One of the projects I worked on in the Obama administration was increasing access to care for women veterans, which is the fastest growing veteran population today. And it was everything from making sure we had enough doctors in place to take care of women coming home from war, to changing the culture at VA, making sure women can walk through the doors of a VA hospital and not be asked for their husband's DD-214, but be asked for theirs as they come home from serving our country. And so we need to continue to work to create additional access for veterans and making sure that they can receive care closer to home. That's something that's very important. Many veterans in Virginia 10 travel to West Virginia to receive care or travel into DC, and we need to make sure veterans can receive their care closer to home.
Whatever happened with that program that the VA had, where if you were a certain distance away, you could go to private doctors? The last I had heard about it was, in theory, you could do that, but the doctors weren't getting paid, and so the doctors were becoming unwilling. Has that gotten straightened out? Is that another one of those things that you think needs to be looked into, and Representative Comstock isn't bothering to do it?
Yes, absolutely. We need to make sure that in Congress, veterans here in Virginia 10 and throughout the country have an advocate, and they've not had an advocate in Congresswoman Comstock. And so that's what I want to do, is be the fighter that I've always been for veterans, and be that in Congress, and making sure they get that care. And I think being able to continue to work at a local level on these issues is really important. It's great to have a national solution, but many of these problems are local, and we need to better partner with communities all throughout the country and here in Virginia 10 to make sure we can create solutions that actually provide the care veterans need.
Okay. Well, I know we've got about 40 seconds left, so I want to make sure that you have the opportunity to say to folks, if they want more information about you, if they want to contact your campaign and get involved, how do they do that?
Great. Absolutely. Thank you for having us. We'd love for you to get involved. Our website is Lindsey, Lindsey, for Congress.com, and you can follow us at Lindsey for Us on Twitter and Facebook.
Terrific. Well, I appreciate you coming in and talking with us, and we'll keep an eye out on the primary and see what happens. And whoever wins, we will make sure to have them back on for some follow-up talk about what they're going to do when they win, because I'm very confident we will take it.
Absolutely.
Next year. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.